welcome to episode 35 of the Hilo Stitch podcast. I'm your host, Kristen, and I'm here to talk to you about all things knitting and knitting related and knitting adjacent and maybe not so knitting adjacent. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. A special thank you to my Patreon patrons who help support the podcast, and a special welcome to any new viewers who are checking out the podcast for the first time. So if you don't know me already, my name is Kristen Janik. I am a semi-retired knitting pattern designer, a knitting instructor, and knitting pattern translator, all-around knitting enthusiast. When I am not knitting or playing with yarn, you can usually find me doing yoga, vegetable gardening, drinking wine, but it's mostly about the knitting, so let's go ahead and start talking about it. All right, so how are we all doing? It is the very end of February, which means we have been in this pandemic, semi-lockdown, social distancing, whatever you want to call it, for almost a year now. I hope you are all still doing well, staying healthy, keeping your distance, wearing your masks, and getting the vaccine when it is available to you. Unfortunately, my husband's father recently passed away from COVID. That was earlier this month. He does not live here in the US. He is from Peru. So this was in Peru. It was very unexpected. He was in his 70s, of course, but to our knowledge, not particularly susceptible to anything, no comorbidities or whatever, underlying conditions. But unfortunately, that didn't matter. So he was actually working. He lives in Lima, but he was in a different part of the country for work. He was doing some kind of business development contractor stuff. I'm not 100% sure. So he was in a different part of the country. He fell ill. He was in the hospital for a couple of weeks. He was on a ventilator and was sedated while he was on the ventilator. And then when they tried to, they wanted to try to bring him out of sedation and see if his blood oxygen levels were improving. So they wanted to kind of gradually bring him out of sedation and see if he could maintain that. But no. This is, obviously, I personally did not know my father-in-law very well because he, lived in Peru and I live here in the United States. So I'd only met him a handful of times. But this was, very hard for my husband, who hadn't seen his father since 2018, which was the last time we were in Peru. We were supposed to go this spring. That's, definitely not happening. And so he obviously, even if he had flown to Peru, he wouldn't have been allowed to see his father. He would have had to stay in quarantine for 14 days. And then he couldn't, do any of the normal kind of mourning rituals that we have, funerals and memorial services and things like that. It was obviously a very difficult time. My kids did not know their grandfather well. They had only met him the time that we were in Peru a couple of years ago. They did, FaceTimes and things like that, but not quite the same. So they, don't really kind of grasp what has happened. But for my husband, I think it was particularly difficult because we basically just had to go on as if life was normal, because we weren't doing, we couldn't do any of those normal grieving things. And, because his dad lives so far away and he doesn't see him that often anyway, it's kind of a disconnect. Nothing has changed, but everything has changed. So I want to encourage you all to please do the social distancing, wear the masks, avoid crowded places, get the vaccine when you can, all of those things, and just remind you that what you're doing is not for you, or at least not just for you. It's for the people around you and the people who are around those people, and so on and so on. Even if you think, perhaps rightly so, that you are unlikely to personally be severely impacted by COVID, you can very easily give it to someone who may be. So just a friendly public service, public health announcement. Please keep doing everything that you have been doing. There is, some hope on the horizon. The vaccine is starting to be distributed, at least here in the US. I know that's not true everywhere, but if we can, I know it's so difficult after a year, but if we can keep these things up, keep doing them, then hopefully sooner rather than later, we will see things starting to get back to normal. So I know that it's not a particularly cheery Chatterbox segment in this episode, but life is not always cheery, and this is something that's important. So mask up, stay home, you have your knitting to keep you busy, and hopefully we will see each other on the other side. All right, moving on to something hopefully a little more lighthearted. And that is on and off the needles. And I actually have things off the needles. I know, it's like a miracle. So I actually have two things off the needles. The first is just a quick pair of mittens. This is the Maze pattern from Tin Can Knits. I really like this as a basic mitten pattern. It comes sized from toddler to, let's see, I think it was toddler, child, and then 3 adult sizes. So these are hopefully, obviously, the child size. This was not on my make right now list. I was actually planning to knit my son a pair of Icy Trails Mittens. I believe that's the pattern name. But that is a more involved project. It's a Fair project. You can use thrums if you want to, sorry, kids are around today, to kind of stuff the inside and make them warmer. So I had to still pick out colors, and I just hadn't done any of those things yet. But early last week, we had a weather forecast that said we were going to get 4 to 6 inches of snow. And we've had a couple of snow events this year, none very big, almost all ending up smaller than was forecast, and almost all mixed with sleet and freezing rain, which kind of stinks. But this one, they said 4 to 6 inches. And for the other kind of snow events that we've had, I had given my son a pair of my old mittens to wear. They were too big, they kept falling off. I just kept putting off making him mittens, and then finally I saw this. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna do some really basic kind of placeholder mittens until I have time to do the Icy Trails mittens. So what we ended up getting was about 2 inches of snow covered by a layer of sleet and freezing rain. No fun to play in, but I just decided to go ahead and finish the mittens anyway, because I figured if I went ahead and finished them, that was probably the quickest way to get spring to arrive, was to knit something very wintry. So again, this is, you might recognize the yarn. This is leftover from the fingerless mitts that I knit for my sister for Christmas, and the chevroche hat that I test knit for Sarah Jordan. So this is Kitty Pride Fibers, tabby worsted, I cannot remember the name of the colorway. I want to say it is Situation Untenable, but I bought 2 colorways and I don't remember which is which. So this was left over from both of those projects. Plenty for a pair of kids mittens, and there's plenty left. I probably could have even made more. So this is, like I said, just a really basic mitten. It's got kind of a ribbing detail along one side. The rest is done in reverse stockinette. The thumb is done in stockinette. If I had taken time to think about it, I probably would have worked them inside out. That didn't occur to me until I was basically finishing up, and I was like, you know, I really don't like purling. I should have done something about that, but these were a really quick knit. And now, you know, he has something to wear if it should snow again. But as I said, finishing a winter project is the surest way to make sure that spring arrives, and it is 58 degrees right now. So mission accomplished. All right, and the other thing I finished is my outline tank. This is a test knit for Jessie Mae Martinson, and it is done. So in my next episode, I'm gonna do a styling segment for you guys where I show you how I'm planning to style this. I've got 3 whole styling ideas, but I think this is gonna be a nice piece, particularly for when the weather gets warm. But I do have one styling option to wear it right now. So she is going to be releasing this pattern in early to mid-March. If you are not familiar with her work, she is focuses on size inclusive design. So there's tons and tons of sizes. This is size 3. It's, I believe, supposed to have, I think I would have noted this. I didn't, and I think I threw the pattern out. I believe it's supposed to have 4 to 6 inches of positive ease or something like that, somewhere around there. So that's what this has for me. It's got 4 to 5 inches of positive ease. It came out right around 40 inches. It's supposed to be 39 and a half. I knit this with Shibui Knits Twig, which is a linen, silk, and wool blend. I really like how the color came out. It looks a little bit kind of marled and speckled because the different fibers take the dye differently. It is, you know, linen can be pretty rough. It was a little rough to work with. Now the way I washed this is I washed it in the washing machine, and we do have a front loader, in the washing machine on the delicate cycle, and then I laid it flat to dry. It did soften up a little bit. I'm not 100% sure if that was the best way. You know, usually linen, you actually want to wash and dry it in the machine, but since this has 10% wool, I wasn't sure how that was going to go. So it did soften up a little bit. I may try putting this in the dryer on low heat until it is like kind of just barely damp, and then laying it flat the rest of the way the next time I have to wash it. But I'm really happy with how it turned out, despite the fact that it is slightly lopsided. So in order to create these lines of what look like eyelets, what you're doing is actually dropping a stitch all the way down. And on the setup round for that, I miscounted. So basically this is divided into 4 sections, you know, front right, front left, back right, back left. And you can see that the armholes are just a little bit deeper than the neck. So you basically work the front and back identically. But since I miscounted, one of my sides is a little bit too small and the other one is a little bit too big. So I actually had finished it and seamed, you know, not a lot of effort. This is a very small seam, but I had seamed the shoulders and realized that something was wrong. So I ripped, let me try to figure out which one. Looks like it's probably this one. I ripped this back out to the top of the neck shaping, which begins I think right around here. So I ripped it out, and then I changed the decrease rate a little bit to get this a little bit longer, but because it had fewer stitches, doing all the shaping in the same rate as in the pattern meant that this was too short. It wasn't as long as the other one. So it is not a perfect piece. I did not have the time nor desire to rip all the way back to the beginning, which is to really fix it. That's what I would have had to do. I may do that eventually, or I may just knit another one of these, because I think this is kind of a versatile layering piece. But for now, it is done, and I'm very happy with it. And like I said, in episode 36, I'm gonna do a styling segment where I show you 3 ways that I am planning to style mostly, because it's kind of for warm weather, styling this outline tank. So 2 whole things off the needles. I know you must be so excited. On the needles, I am still working on my Ursina, but I'm almost done. So if you'll recall, this is part of my Make 9 for 2021. And I've got the whole body done, and I'm more than halfway done this sleeve, which is going very quickly. So I expect to be done this by the end of the month. I am currently recording on February 24th, Wednesday. So Sunday will be the last day of the month, and I'm expecting to have this off the needles by then. Probably not washed and blocked, but I expect to finish it up then. This is great pattern, very well written, no complaints at all. I have tried it on, and it seems to fit, but of course it's easier to tell when it has sleeves. The only thing I'm not 100% sure about is that it calls for just a knitwise bind off at the bottom of the body, and I don't love it. It's not like a problem with it, it's just personally I don't like it very much. I thought about doing a different kind of bind off. There is a bind off called, I want to say it's called the Italian bind off, that works really well for brioche, or in this case half brioche, but it's also very involved and I just didn't feel like doing it. So I went ahead with the knitwise bind off. I could always pull it out. I don't think it's going to bother me enough that I'm going to pull it out, but I would go on the record as saying I don't love it. So it is what it is, but I'm really happy with this sweater. And like I said, getting pretty close to the sleeves, and then the sleeves just end kind of like a slightly rolled cuff, because it's just stockinette all the way down. Then you bind off knitwise, no ribbing or anything. There is this little detail under the arm where you're working a column. Again, it's a little harder to see in this tweedy yarn, but you're working a column in that half brioche stitch, and I'm kind of playing with the idea when I get a little closer to the bottom of the sleeve to kind of repeating that triangle shape, so that it kind of would come down and then kind of spread, kind of around the wrist. We'll see. I really am eager to get something done, so I don't know if I'll take the time to do that, but we'll see. So this is still on the needles, but getting very close to being done. I have not cast on anything new. I am still working on my Finish Fix Frog stuff, and I am very close to finishing 2 of my whips, and you can learn more about that in the Finish Fix or Frog vlog series, which I'll do the linky thing too. So I haven't cast on anything new, but I did wind the yarn for the next project from my Make 9. I'm kind of finishing up a sweater, so I'm gonna do one of the smaller projects, which in this case is a hat. So I have wound the yarn for the vintage prim hat. Go ahead and pop a photo in here. So you can see this is a 2-color brioche with a little bit of fancy stuff going on. And I absolutely do not need, these are fingering weight yarn, 400-ish yards each. that's far, far more than I will need. But I think this is a nice color combination. This is from Fiber for the People's Values Club, or was it the club before that? I think it's the Values Club. I think it's from the Values Club, which was just at the end of 2020. I'm not sure of the name. I want to say Querida, but there was another kind of reddish one, so I will double check. But that's Fiber for the People. This one is from Wool & Boon, and I think I got this at Vogue. I want to say I got it at Vogue Knitting Live in 2000. When did I go? 2018 or 2019, whenever I went. Vogue Knitting Live, New York. Possibly that's when I got it. I remember looking at their yarn there. But anyway, this colorway is called Thistle, which is the name of our dog. And you can see kind of the speckles in this matching this. So I think that's going to be really cute for the hat. And then I'm going to have plenty left for a shawl or cowl or something that can be kind of coordinating. So I have wound that yarn. It's here, but I have not cast on that project yet. I won't cast it on until I finish Ursina, I think, theoretically. And that is what I have for you on and off the needles in this episode. So I finally have this pattern drop for you. My Retico Pullover is finally available. You will recall this is a pullover where I had to knit all of the color work twice, then it is finally done. So the first thing I'm going to do is pop a couple of photos in here. I went with kind of a 60s inspired look here. I did the whole twiggy makeup and everything. Because it's kind of a mod inspired piece. It has a swingy shape, the bell sleeves. And now I'm going to turn the video camera around and just give you a close-up of the actual sweater and share a couple of the details. All right, so here she is all finished up. You can see just a traditional raglan from the top down, a couple of short rows, using the German short row technique here, just to drop the front of the neck a little bit. Neck is a little bit wider than a crew neck, so it's a little bit higher in the back. I like how the raglan lines look really nice. Elbow length sleeves that widen, and then finish with a contrast trim. And I used a tubular bind off on the sleeves, but you can certainly just use a regular. And then the body is worked in an A-line shape. So, hi Dory. It increases outward to where the point where the color work starts, and then you work the color work. It is 43 rows of color work, and it starts on the side, so sometimes you kind of have a little bit of a wonkiness where it starts, and that's kind of hidden over on the side. And there are actually two different charts. So some sizes use this chart, which is a 34 stitch repeat, and then the other sizes use a slightly modified version of the chart that better fits the sizing. It's just minor differences, basically the same. And then finish off with, I did a 2x2 rib. You can do whatever you like, just about a 1/2 inch. And at the bottom, I just used a regular, just bound off in pattern. I didn't use the tubular bind off. The yarn is dark and you're really not seeing the hem as much as perhaps the sleeves. And there she is, all done. Retico Pullover. All right, so the Retico Pullover is available in both my Ravelry and PayHip shops, and it is priced according to my newfangled tiered pricing system, which means that the default price is a fair wage price, a price that allows me to earn a fair living wage for my work. However, there are two lower price points that you can access through the discount codes that are provided, which are intended to help keep the pricing accessible so that everybody, other people who are probably also not earning a fair or living wage, everyone has access to patterns. So links to my Ravelry shop and my PayHip shop are in the information box down below. And of course, a direct link to the pattern in both those places can be found in the show notes. All right, for news and events, I want to let you know that doors to my Swatchmaster e-course are closing. By the time you watch this, they will be right on the verge of closing. They may have already closed, just depending on how quickly you decide to access the episode. But they are closing. The Swatchmaster e-course starts on March 1st, which is Monday, if you're watching this as soon as it's available, because I know everyone is. And this is the only time I am offering Swatchmaster as a live e-course this year. I am working on developing self-study versions of my e-courses. I haven't completed that yet, and when those are offered, they're not going to be quite as comprehensive as the live versions. So the live versions of my e-courses include access to an exclusive Facebook group. They include a weekly, what I like to call office hours, where you can chat with me and the other students. They include, new this year, the opportunity to schedule a one-on-one consultation if that's something that you're interested in. So they are much more interactive. They include much more feedback from me, from your fellow students and things like that. And that's only going to be part of the live version of my e-courses. So when those self-study versions become available, they will have a lower price point, but they also just won't be able to include as much stuff. So this is really your best opportunity to get a handle on swatching, engage, figure out what it's all about, learn how you're going to use your swatches to get the information you need to make great knitting projects, basically. I do my yoga with Adrienne, who is also on YouTube. And one thing she's always reminding her students is to set a solid foundation. So before you try to get into all these different poses, make sure you are set up right first. Make sure your foundation is solid. And that is kind of what this course is about, but for knitting. When you get the sort of real firm handle on the basics, like swatching and like gauge, and learn what they're really for and how to use the information from your swatches and translate it into your knitting projects, that's setting up a solid foundation. So all of the information you're going to be learning in this course is just going to be setting you up for future success. It's not kind of like a one-time deal where you're taking a course and you're just learning this one thing. You are learning a lot of information that is going to be applicable to all of your future knitting projects. So if you are at all interested in that, doors are on the verge of closing, so make sure that you are enrolled. I will include a direct link to the enrollment page in the information box down below, or you can visit mediaperuana.com/swatchmaster. Other news/events, samples. Now that I am somewhat retired from pattern design, I have a lot of samples that I just don't need. Things that, I enjoy designing but aren't really my style to continue using. Things that, maybe aren't the right size for me because I was knitting them for a magazine that was requesting a specific size, or I was knitting things for children. Any number of reasons. I have a lot of samples that I am no longer using and I don't have a need for, and so I'm going to be starting to sell those off. Again, I will include a link in the information box down below. I'm going to sell them directly through my website at mediaperuana.com. I'm going to be selling those off. I'm slowly starting to add them. I'll be adding more as I go along. They will be priced at what I hope is a reasonable price. You know, I don't need them in my house, and I don't need them taking up space, but at the same time, there was a lot of time and effort that went into them, and you know, underpricing things kind of devalues it for everybody. So you can find that directly on my website. Again, link in the information box down below. Lots of samples. I have published over 100 knitting patterns, so I don't know exactly what's going to be in there, but stuff for mostly women, but some stuff for kids too, so go check that out. And the last event that I want to tell you about, this will not, if you are not in the United States, and particularly in the eastern half of the United States, this is not going to affect you. But for those who are kind of in the mid-Atlantic region, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Virginia, North Carolina, even over into Illinois and Tennessee, Georgia, but somehow not North Carolina, I don't know, and New York, the cicadas are coming. This is an event that fortunately only happens a few times in your lifetime, because the cicadas from brood X, brood 10, only come out every 17 years. But the bad news is that this is the year that they came out. So they came out in 1987 and 2004, and this is the year again that the cicadas are coming. Cicadas are harmless, but they're gross, and they're big, and they are ugly, and they're really clumsy, and they cannot see. So there will be millions of them coming out. Whoopi, do you want to come be on my podcast?
Yeah.
Yeah? With the Game Boy? All right. So, this is Ollie. You say hi?
Hi.
Can you turn that down a little bit? Just a little bit, turn it down. Thank you. So, the cicadas are coming. Oh, they're clumsy. So, there are millions of them, and they mostly stay in the trees. But when they do come out of the trees, they don't see well. They fly into things constantly, and especially if you have long hair, it can be unpleasant. They're really big. Their bodies are like this long, and their wings are like this, and they make a lot of noise. The good news is they're not around that long. They start coming out sort of at the end of May, and by early July, they're mostly gone, because what happens is they live underground, and so the nymphs crawl out from underground, and they climb up the trees and attach, and then they come out of the shell, and then they, sprout their wings, and they basically are just living to mate and die. So they're around for a few weeks, they lay their eggs, and then they die, and then they're everywhere. I mean, like, everything will eat them. If you have dogs, they may eat them, they may try to play with them, they may bring them in your house. Clearly I'm traumatized. They're probably not that bad. It's just that my mom was terrified of them, and that's the first time they came, I think I was 6, same age as Ollie. And so she just ingrained that in my head. And so I am freaked out by them. I'm trying not to, I have boys, so it's a little different. Trying not to over terrify my children, but I feel like you should be warned. The cicadas are coming, and from late May until early July, they're gonna be out here making a lot of noise, being gross. Little bits of them are gonna be left all over the place because like everything eats them, but they leave the wings and some of the more crunchy parts. Dogs either think they're candy or toys. So, what do you think of cicadas? Good?
Yeah.
Do you love cicadas?
Yeah.
They are gross, you're right, but he's a boy, so.
I love it.
Ew! All right, so that is the last event I want to tell you about. The cicadas are coming and you have been warned. All right, so that about wraps it up for this episode. It's pretty short, at least for me. I really wanted to get 2 episodes out in February, but I'm talking to the internet, honey. I really wanted to get 2 episodes out a month, and I forgot that February is a short month. So a little on the short side today. Hopefully a better and more comprehensive episode the next time. So thank you so much for joining me. Again, a special thank you to my Patreon patrons who help keep this podcast up and running. If you are interested in supporting the podcast and getting some extra perks and freebies and bonuses, be sure you check out my Patreon at patreon.com/mediaperuana. Here on YouTube, if you can please do me the gracious favor of liking this episode, subscribing, leaving comments, sharing videos, all of those things help spread the reach of the channel. Oh Lord, and the podcast and all of those free knitting tutorials that I have here as well. Links to everything that I have talked about can be found in the show notes at mediaperuana.com/Hilo and Stitch. You will also find some pertinent links in the comment box or information box down below. If you are looking for me on social media, you can find me on Instagram as Media Peruana, and I will see you next time.
How about the car?
All right, we'll try to open the car part. What do you think? A whole new Hot Wheels track for all of your Hot Wheels.
Okay, hold
Wow.
on. We have more presents.
Look, where is it?
I will get them in a minute.
More presents! Whoopee! Yeah! Yay! More presents!
Okay.